Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Which fraternity?
Sigma Pi.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty much.
Yeah. Actually, I'm here to talk about how sky is better than theory. And how we should scrap this whole thing that we're working on, right?
Great.
My professors. Yeah.
But in the fall.
I also like Canvas better because they give like, and then
I
they
love
send
it.
like presentations on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like all my classes, that's nice.
That's really the whole presentation.
Yeah.
Canvas is better than Sky. Yeah.
Do you not, can you force it on Sky? There's like this
Yeah.
course called Sandbox course.
Oh, on Canvas.
I used to use this.
Can you get rid of it?
Yeah, the same hours.
Yeah, you can. Why would you not?
Well, it's just in the room. I like fan, right? I would use all my classes.
Oh, you can do some Canvas things. Oh, you hiding behind the podium.
You think we should sit down or just stand? Okay.
Yeah, it's tough to tell with her. Well, based on the conversation. Hey! I tried. I forgot your title for a second. I was like, and the Canvas manager? Manager. For the Great Building Platforms manager?
Maybe we'll give people a minute to.
Yeah.
Mine only lasts 11, 12 minutes. Or 10 minutes. Really? Oh, I was gonna say, wow.
Yeah, I should get my phone.
Yeah.
No worries.
We're actually gonna do the spaghetti project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I picture what this
We're doing it.
we're doing right now. See how you guys are.
Should I start? I should start stronger.
Yeah, we'll start.
Right?
Plus, we can hear our voices and good stuff we can say.
That's right.
All right, do you guys want to get started? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our first presentation, kicking off TechX 2020. So we're going to start and open up with a great one, the Canvas experience. So we have Brian Calhoun, who's an associate professor for education. We have Frank Whitworth, who's a computer science student and a member of the media. Super tech savvy, awesome. And Laura Brewer, who is our manager of learning platforms for academic technology. And they are going to discuss the migration process from Sakai to Canvas. And Brian will be sharing his experience as a faculty member teaching in Canvas for the very first time this term. And then Frank will wrap us up talking about his experience using Canvas from the student perspective. So I give you the Canvas experience.
Okay, I get the magic one. Hi, I'm Laura. I know most of you in here. Hi, Laura. Hi. I don't really want to hang out by the microphone, so can you guys hear me back there?
We're live streaming that.
Oh, fine. All right. Okay, now can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So, welcome to the Canvas experience. I am the LMS manager here. For the last 5 or 6 months now, I've been doing all Canvas all the time. So we just wanted to give you a little introduction, talk to you about what the migration experience has been like so far. First, I wanted to point out this is our beautiful Canvas website, canvas.wfu.edu. All things Canvas are happening here, so news about the migration, any updates. We've also got links to in-person training opportunities, videos that instructors or students might find useful. And we've also got a whole page of ITG tech tips for how to get things done in Canvas. All of that is happening here. So, Canvas migration, where are we now? At this point, all faculty members have been contacted about moving their content that they would like from Sakai to Canvas. So far, we have migrated over 3,000 courses from Sakai to Canvas. We've been using this tool called K16. We were referring to this as the easy button because basically we give them a list of all the course IDs in Sakai, and they wave their magic wand and it magically appears in Canvas for the instructors. This is by far the easiest migration from one platform to another that I have ever experienced in my time in academia. So we have access to this tool through the end of, I think, June. And after that, it'll become a very manual process. So we have been reaching out to faculty, encouraging them to get their stuff moved over so they don't have to worry about it. And then the last term to be taught in Sakai will be summer 2020. So as of fall term 2020, all courses that are going to be online will be in Canvas. What's going to happen to Sakai? We've been getting a lot of questions about this. So Sakai is not going to disappear. It will go into read-only mode after summer of 2020. So you'll still be able to access all of your content, whether you're a student or faculty. You'll still be able to get in there for a year. You just won't be able to add anything new. And then after summer of 2021, it's going into what they're referring to as cold storage. So we're going to host it locally, and we're not going to keep that access live all the time. There'll be an Ask Deke ticket that you can submit, and they'll go in and get that specific content for you. And we'll keep access to that in an Ask Deke ticket mode for whatever our legal obligations are for student data. And then I love this slide because these numbers were far more impressive than we anticipated them being. We've got 238 faculty here at Wake Forest teaching in Canvas already. We were anticipating maybe 25 people would show up to our early adopter training sessions back in the fall, and we had 150 people sign up. And then 238 of them found their way to Canvas so far. There's 383 courses already being taught in Canvas, and I'm sure Frank has some things he'll share with you about the experience of being in two worlds right now. But it's encouraging because we've got 4,700 students taking a course in Canvas, so I think we're on the right track. And hopefully this will be an easy transition for them, having so many options already in Canvas. And then I just wanted to talk to you really quick about a couple of our favorite things that we've discovered since we started migrating to Canvas. First thing is the mobile app. Now, Sakai did not have a mobile app, so we've asked teachers and students to try it out, tell us what they think. And so far, it's pretty mind-blowing how much you can do on a mobile app without actually opening your desktop or your laptop. And then the other thing, which is more for faculty than students, is SpeedGrader. Basically, there's no need to download submissions, grade them offline, push them back up again. SpeedGrader lets you open everything inline. You can annotate directly on a student submission. You can draw on it. You can highlight it. and you can leave audio and video feedback, and then close that tab, and you're done grading. It's pretty simple. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is where to get help. We've had several people ask us, what are our resources for getting help if we have questions about Canvas? And as you'll notice, we have a few. So Canvas has 24/7 support available to us. They don't outsource their support, so whether you're faculty or student or staff, if you reach out to Canvas through their chat or their hotline at 2 in the morning, someone in Salt Lake City is going to answer you, which is pretty amazing. There's also the Canvas community, so if you're more of a do-it-yourselfer and you like to search for answers on your own, you can go to the Canvas community site, and there's a search function up in the top right corner. That'll search not only the Canvas guides, which is the official Canvas documentation for how to find things, but it'll also search the conversations that are happening between other Canvas users. So a lot of times people have come up with workarounds for how to do things in Canvas that official documentation hasn't gotten around to yet. So searching the whole community will get you answers to just about everything you need. You can also go, of course, to the bridge or submit an Ask Geek ticket, and then your ITG members if you are a faculty member. That's it for me. Brian's turn.
Thank you, Laura. So I was asked to provide a faculty perspective on Canvas, and I can tell you to this point, I am thoroughly enjoying Canvas in the classes that I teach. I'm using it in 2 classes right now. I always wanted to provide you all with a picture of what's out there. This is what my dashboard looks like currently. So the classes that I'm currently teaching are up in the upper left-hand corner. So I'm teaching 2 120 classes right now. The students' feedback from this is they love getting the instant feedback, especially from when I'm grading material or providing them with notes, audio comments. I'm annotating on their documents directly, either with a highlighter or with a pen, and letting them know just exactly how they're doing. And they enjoy seeing where they are progressing in the classroom. It's always a good thing when you have that communication with the class. Now I'll show you the other classes that I'm going to teach are already out there. So I've already got my 220 class, which will launch right before spring break next week, and then my 320 class that'll launch again right before spring break. You can see the Sandbox course is available, and I'm already prepping for my online course in the summer. In summer, I will be teaching purely in the Canvas learning management system. Again, this is another thing that I think will be very useful for faculty here on campus. It's the Canvas Commons. This is where you can search for any templates that are out there. Laura's already got a lot of templates out there. They've been downloaded a number of times. I can see 91 times, as well as templates for undergraduates. And then there's a module that's been created as well. And the great thing about Wake Forest is that we can share our best practices with Canvas. You can go to Canvas Commons. You can see how things are set up in assignments. You can see how modules are set up. It's very user-friendly. Again, it's a great way to kind of share with other members of the faculty here on campus. This is just a grade. Again, I will promise I'm not going to show any student information just due to the confidential nature, but this is what I see when I'm looking at my dashboard. An assignment. So this is an assignment that I have in my 120 class. Again, it's an informational interview. It gives all the preparation, all the material that they'll need. I have a Google link to possible questions they could ask during an informational interview, which I oftentimes get. I've oftentimes will put a video too to just explain the instructions through, so if they wanted to do a short clip. You can see that great speed grader up there in the right-hand corner that Laura mentioned. It is a speed grader. It really does help you go through the material, be able to provide feedback to the students, and then send it directly to them. They get immediately, once I grade a project, they get an email that says what they got, their score, it has the feedback. So I promised my class I would not do any grading at 3 o'clock in the morning. All right, because they would get an email from me at 3 o'clock in the morning that their grade had been submitted in Canvas. This is what another great feature that I wanted to share with you as a faculty member is the rubric. Rubrics are available on the assignment page. This is one of the projects that I have the students working on right now. It's a This I Believe statement. I give them the criteria. It goes through and lets them know exactly what I'm looking for in an assignment. I think that's really what students want, is a transparency on assignments. So again, you can rate it. You can plug in the total points. You don't even have to do arithmetic. It will calculate it out for you. So again, 7 points for full, sophisticated, competent, and 2 points for not yet competent. You can change that as well. So if I wanted to say sophisticated, competent, or developing, I didn't want to use the term not yet competent, you can do that. You can change the way you can have this listed. But I wanted to show that to you all. The other thing I like and enjoy is the calendar. The calendar is very visual, so you can see on the calendar of assignments the assignments that have come up, but also have expired. So the student automatically knows, did I finish that assignment that I needed on that particular date? And they can see what's coming up. And I think that's always a good thing when you have it visually within the dashboard. All right, that's what I had from the faculty perspective. Again, I appreciate you all coming and listening to that perspective. And then Frank Whitworth, who I've had in class before, he didn't get to enjoy the Canvas experience in my class, but had Sakai. But you have, from a student perspective, what Canvas looks like.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Calhoun. So I'm Frank Whitworth. I'm a sophomore at Wake Forest. I'm a computer science major with a minor in Middle Eastern and South Asian Studies. I'm the Student Technology Advisory Committee co-chair, along with Victoria, who's here. We're led by Sarah Oten-John. She's an awesome faculty member who's helped us develop this committee, and she's been there with us, so she's been great. So in the stack, that's what we call the Student Technology Advisory Committee. Our goal is to mainly bridge the gap between students and the IS department. And that's essentially what I'm going to be doing here as well. I'm going to be bridging the gap between the students and you guys to understand what the student's perspective is like. So we're going to go through a couple pros and cons. Pros of cons in Canvas. First, we're going to go through pros. We have the UI or interface, the files, or as it was known in Sakai, resources tab, the discussion tab, and then the phone app. So first off, we're going to be talking about the UI or interface. I just put a little picture, screen grab of the messaging, the mail system that is in Canvas. It allows the professor to send you any mail right to your inbox, and it goes to this inbox as well as your actual inbox that you have with your Wake Forest account. It's very nice. You know, it's very easy to tell which professor sent me it, from what class. It's a very nice interface. And this is not just the only interface that's very, very user-friendly. All the interfaces in this system, in Canvas, is just very polished and very just modern, and it's very user-friendly, and I love to use it, and all my friends love to use it as well. So UI interface is a very good pro. Next is the files or resources tabs. This is probably one of my favorite expansions from Sakai. So in Sakai, we used to have the resources tabs, and what used to happen is that we used to get these PDFs from online, but we would have to download them. So I would have these random files all over littered my computer, and it was not okay. I did not like it. And so what's great about this one is not only that you can see exactly what file you're getting from which folder, but there's a preview. So you can see here, instead of downloading the file, you can just see a preview right here. So this file right here is only 4 pages long, but I had an article I had to read for my English course on Canvas that was 50 pages long. And personally, I did not want to download that, so I just went right to the reader, and I did not have to download it, and I just scrolled down through the whole thing and just read it and annotated on my other piece of paper, and it was good to go. I didn't have to download it or anything. It was a great experience. So that's one aspect that professors should utilize is the files tab. Next is the discussion tab. I personally am a computer science major, so I don't really do discussions a lot, but I do it in my English class right now. And so you can see here we have a weekly discussion. And what happens is that the professor, he puts out a discussion and a prompt, as you can see on this screen grab, and then you can see his photo and all of that, and then you can enter in through that reply button underneath the discussion prompt. And what's great about this is that the in-text editor is actually very good. It saves your work for you. You can highlight different words. You can make them different fonts. You can make them different colors. It's very nice. And as you can see here, a small feature that I really like is that you can see the photo or the win photo of a classmate who posts to Canvas. It's the small details that matter and count, and I really like that. I can put a name and face to the discussion entry. It's very nice. And then next, the application. This is great. I really enjoy the application. I use it almost every day. it's very easy, especially with that under that files tab, to go into the tab and just read your article that you have to in bed. It's super easy, and it really doesn't give me an excuse to be on my phone and not be working anymore, which stinks. But it's a very nice app, very user friendly, like I said, and something that I encourage professors to use as well as students, because there is a like Laura said, there is a professor app, so you can go in and do all of that inside of your own app as well. And so we're going to talk about the cons now. So the only cons that I really see are just the parallel implementation, which couldn't have been avoidable at all. But those are some cons that have been talked about around campus. It's just using Sakai and Canvas at the same time. But truly, I think that's the only way to implement Canvas. So I think they've done a really good job with the parallel implementation. And then also just the change in general. Students don't necessarily like change, and professors as well. But this is a change that we should embrace totally. In 3 years down the line, a student will not even remember what Sakai was. So we have to realize that that change is going to be necessary one time, and I think it's a great change that we should totally embrace. So last but not least, I want to plug my committee once again. We've developed, along with Laura, a Canvas course competition. This is an awesome competition that I wish I could participate in. So it's where you get something called a sandbox, and that is when you go into your Canvas and you develop your own course, your own general course, and then you send it in to the judges, which are going to be me, Victoria, and our committee members, and we're going to judge them. And we got some really cool prizes for the students to get. We have a catered study session with dinner, coffee, and snacks on campus with you and 5 of your friends. That's awesome. So that's for first place. And then second place, we have a $50 Amazon gift card. And then third place, a $25 Starbucks gift card. Those are sweet prizes, and I wish I was doing that. But it's going to be a great competition, and it's going to be a really cool way of integrating Canvas into students' day-to-day lives as well. So make sure that you sign up before March 16th, and then they're due by March 20th. Students, yeah, sorry, the students. Unfortunately, faculty can't use that, but I wish. So it was, for all the students out there, it was in the Tech Exploration email, and there's a link that you could click, and that's a Google form. It goes right to Laura, and it's great. So yeah, so I'll be here to answer any questions, and especially all 3 of us. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So what questions do you have for us? Yeah.
I have a question and a comment. Brian, one of the things I've enjoyed using Canvas this semester is the student view option. I never knew what it would look like in the student setting, and I use that all the time to see, after I post new material, what students are actually seeing. It works really helpful. My question is, struggle on having a Sakai allowed me to create exams in Word and then use some more ground to get the exam questions in. And now I'm having to write all the questions, what question it is to create exams. I don't know if there's a workaround to that, or if you know the solution to simplify quizzes and exams.
There should be an import function, and I'll have to do some research on that, but I would believe that you wouldn't have to type them up. You're just putting them directly into a quiz bank, it sounds like right now.
That's what I'm having to do, is write everything down.
We'll talk about a solution.
Yeah. So you were importing them from a Word document?
In Sakai I was. Of course, I'm working with an online educator who helped me. It's very simple.
Yeah.
I would just create like the language.
Okay.
Yeah, usually it's a comma space limited import. Yeah, so I'm sure there's.
But I've tried to search and people have workarounds with apply for work, and that's what I can't find anything that says.
What about just importing your quizzes from Sakai to Canvas?
These are all new. This is
Oh, it's all new. Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, there's got to be a way to import it. I have not heard of being able to do it from a Word document, but I would imagine there's a way to import it a different way. We'll take a look. Yeah. What else you got? Okay. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming to the presentation. We have another presentation coming up at 1:15. Lieutenant Colonel Melissa Ringheisen will be speaking about, she's also a professor and chair of military science. I'm co-presenting with her, and we're going to be talking about the implementation of podcasting and storytelling into the curriculum. Thanks, guys. That was
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
You guys.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. No pressure.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Eric, there's got to be a way to do it.
Yeah.
makes sense. So just keep it simple for the students. How I'm saying just limit, don't have it so few
Yes.
options as possible.
Yes.
Simplifies
Yep.
the way they navigate and then keeping in mind that
Yep. What?
Mr. Bradley has had some amazing experiences from all his time spent within the network.
connected. And
And I
let's
went
see.
to system preferences.
Let's see, and you're using a Mac, so it's AirPlay.
Sound. Output 401C.
So, all right, so it's all good. Volume's definitely way up. Is the audio playing right now? Probably the Apple TV.
I mean, I can plug back in and just hold this mic to the laptop if I need to.
I was gonna say,
So it's very strange to go from a class where everybody is like seen Star Wars and wants to talk about it to this class and I'm like, what do you mean you guys have never seen these episodes? Darth Vader and Mission Command is a perfect discussion. But if you've seen 4, 5, 6, that's enough. We can have a discussion about Star Wars. I mean, the other ones are kind of.
When you think of the milk,
Might have to turn that volume up a bit, but I think we're good.
Yeah, to speak over all these other. So who 3D printed Baby Yoda?
I don't know. I think someone, a student from the Makerspace, or that works at the Makerspace.
The force is strong with that one.
Life goals. I think it was when I took you guys over to the Waker Space, right? The guy had the laser like clock, the not laser printed, the engraved one. Yeah. You have to tell your husband he has to take you to Disney World so you can go to Star Wars and make a lightsaber now.
Probably 3D print one of these.
Gotta do the experience though. I don't know. I haven't been yet to Star Wars World. I assume the Millennium Falcon. I don't know. Did you go on the Millennium Falcon ride?
Yeah, it was mediocre.
Oh
The
man.
other one, the Resistance ride,
Yeah.
was the best ride.
That was good. Oh wow.
It's more of an experience than a ride.
All right, I guess maybe we'll get started.
Get started.
Do an announcement, but
Sit down and we'll
Yeah.
kind of call you up.
and this is live streaming, so we do have to use the microphone.
Okay. All right.
I'm
See,
sorry.
there's your answer. It's live stream.
Hi, folks. Thank you all for coming to this presentation. My name is Brianna Durr. I'm the manager of Advanced Learning Projects, and I work for Information Systems, Academic Technology. And this semester and last semester, I had the pleasure of partnering with Lieutenant Colonel Melissa Ringheisen. She's a professor and chair of military science. And today we are going to be co-presenting with two students, Jordan Diamond and Ethan Werner, and we're also going to hear from Captain Michael Fisher, who is a veteran sharing his experience. So this is about utilizing a podcast for storytelling, and I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and she's going to begin talking about the course and the implementation of the project.
Okay. Thanks.
And I'm sorry. We do have 3 lightsabers we can pass around because this is a Star Wars themed presentation.
So thanks very much. So I am Lieutenant Colonel Melissa Ringheisen. I'm the chair of the Department of Military Science, professor of military science, head of the ROTC department here at Wake Forest University. And I have the great pleasure of teaching a class called Strategy Strikes Back, which is a first-year seminar. And so we use Star Wars as a way to talk about grand strategy and military strategy. So I always tell the students I won't talk about tactics during in Star Wars movies because their tactics is awful. So we go way up into the operations and strategy area. But we talk about things like how do clones interact with the society that they're coming or that they're not coming from in Star Wars. How does that parallel the all-volunteer force? Does it parallel the all-volunteer force? How do we go to war? How does society decide to make those, to choose to go to war and what wars we choose to go to? What are ethics in war? And so we try to kind of go over a lot of these bigger themes about how we apply military power, but also the other aspects of state power, so diplomacy, information, and economics as well, to influence the world. And at the end of the day, I mean, Star Wars is really storytelling. And if we think about it, that's really how we teach some of the hardest concepts to kids all the time, right? So Star Wars teaches us about what war is like in a lot of ways. And so it becomes a great opportunity to teach our students about strategy and thinking about that broader application of military power and diplomacy to these big issues so that they can be better citizens. So most of the students in my FYS are not actual in the ROTC program. Apparently the ROTC students said that they don't get priority seating in classes, so they're very angry that I can't get them into my class. So they get superseded by a lot of regular Wake students who want to come in and learn about this. And so we use that as kind of a bridge, because if you've ever read real strategy like Clausewitz, it's hard to dig through. But then when you start talking about, did Han shoot first is an example of preemptive war, that's a different discussion and gets the students engaged to discuss these topics. So as part of that, we're watching stories and using that as kind of the basis for this class. And so when I originally built the class, I had doing an interview with a veteran as one of their projects. Because we wanted to get into that storytelling, right? So how do you get someone else to tell you their story? And then how do you relate that to other things that are going on, things that you learn in the classroom, and then back to Star Wars. So the original version of this class, when I taught it the first time, I had them write a paper. So they conducted an in-person interview, did a summarized transcript, and then wrote a 2 to 3 page kind of summary and compared it to course content, talked about how Clausewitz talks about going to war and war as an alternative to, or as politics by other means. How does society relate to war? How do we have civil-military relations in the U.S.? And then they talked about how that relates to Star Wars. So it was an okay project. Most of the students said it was great interviewing someone. A lot of them interviewed family members. But it was kind of an average project, right? They wrote a paper at the end. So I got lucky that Brianna came by and started talking about the idea of using technology in the classroom. And so I had the idea that this would be even better if we did it as a podcast. So for those of you, I tell the students all the time, so I'm that mom who makes my kids sit in the back of the Volvo and listen to NPR all the time. So my thought was StoryCorps, right? That's a great opportunity to hear someone's story and then put it into context with what was going on in the broader society at that time. And so based on that idea and then talking to Brianna, we kind of transitioned this to conduct the in-person interview, record it, edit it, and then still reflect on what you learned and how that compares to course content and comparing it to Star Wars in your conclusion of your podcast. So you kind of do a whole project that involves this interview and getting a chance to talk to a veteran, but it also showcases some of the other aspects in storytelling in a little bit better way than we had previously. And so it really kind of touches on a couple of things. So we in the U.S. Army are being told, hey, get out there and tell your story. The all-volunteer force is only 1% of the population. And so people don't necessarily know the stories like they do when they had family members who served in World War II or Vietnam. So that gets our students engaged in hearing those stories from veterans that we have, but also engages them with their own family members who may have that kind of story to tell that maybe they've never heard. So to me, the value of the project was you got a voice from a veteran who's talking to you about, okay, now you've seen what war looks like in Star Wars. Let's talk about it, what it really looks like in the real world, maybe. We have discussions about how do you talk about those tough topics. So if you're interviewing a veteran and they're going to talk about a time when they were in combat, how do you handle that in a way that is respectful of their experiences and doesn't make them uncomfortable, but allows them to share with you what it's really like, not what it looks like on film. Students a lot of times interviewed a relative, and so that was really interesting. I had students come back and tell me that, hey, I talked to my parents and I interviewed Grandpa, and I found out that, Grandpa has never told this story to my dad or my mom. And so now I can play the podcast for them, and they can hear Grandpa talk about his experience in Vietnam that he really has never shared with anybody. So I got that story, but I also get to share it with the rest of the family, which was really great for a lot of those kids. It really was interesting to hear them come back and say, I'd never heard his perspective on this. I'd never heard my cousin's perspective on why they joined the military, and I never thought to ask. So that was really a great outcome that we had for the project. And then the students seemed a lot more at ease with a podcast style. When I told them to write an interview and then write a transcript, of course, they didn't get the reference. I was like, you're not Walter Cronkite. I don't expect you to catch these things. They all looked at me funny and asked who that was. But they seemed like they were very concerned that they were going to not ask the right questions or not get to the right topics, whereas podcasts, I think, are something they're more familiar with. And so it was great that it gave the project a little bit more kind of focus to something that they're really familiar with. And then we had some unexpected results. So in order to teach them how to podcast, we had to take them to the Wakerspace and show them where the resources were for them to be able to use that technology. So a lot of our students didn't know that they could download some of these programs from Wake Forest and use them to do their editing. They didn't know how to get a hold of a Blue Yeti mic in order to do these kinds of things. They didn't even know that the Wakerspace existed. And so we got a lot of, just additional knowledge of students about resources available to them. Reinforcing time management. So if you've taught at Wake, maybe you've heard the phrase, do Friday, do Friday. I think for a lot of students, writing a paper is kind of old hat by the time that they are in their freshman year in college. They've been doing it for, probably 6 or 7 years now, and so they do feel like they can wait till the last minute. This forced them to do something new, and so a lot of them expressed that like, hey, I realized when I edited, I wish I had more time for editing. I wish that I had thought about, researching and getting the music earlier so that I could really think about where I wanted to put it. I ran out of time. And so it reinforced some of those things that you can tell them 1,000 times to start the project early, but generally students aren't going to listen. But this forced them to do some new things, and those new techniques caused them to really rethink how they did time management. And hopefully maybe our students will talk about that a little bit. And then I have changed the class over time. So not that I ever thought that I had the right answer the first time, but the first time I ran the podcast class, which our 2 students did, the first class that I did the podcast, I didn't talk as much about time management. We used some different editing software. We played around with some ideas the first time through. I just got my projects back for this semester for the podcast, and we've adjusted some things. So we changed out the editing software to make it more user-friendly and use Adobe Rush instead of Audacity. We've adjusted where we have them do the interviews. We've talked to them more about the time management aspects and really worked through some of those aspects. So it was really neat that like even when I thought I had thought this all out, we still got some unexpected results that were actually pretty positive for most of the students. So now I'll hand over to Brianna to talk about the academic technology that we used.
Great, thank you. So as a member of academic technology, my mission is to work with faculty in the curriculum, implementing digital tools and technology and multimodal storytelling. So I'm extremely passionate. I'm a multimodal storyteller by heart. I'm an artist, a musician. I'm a singer-songwriter, so I paint. So I have a lot of different modes of communication, but I love thinking about stories in different modes. It's really exciting. So how do you tell a story in different ways? So that is our mission, is to implement technology to aid in the enhancement of teaching and learning in the curriculum. So how do we teach students how to do this? So first, we looked at the technology that Melissa was interested in doing, going from a paper transcript to a digital tool. What is the best tool that we can do? There's a variety of options. There is podcasting, there's digital stories, there's website design, digital essays or documentary shorts, but we agreed that the podcast was the right tool for this because the voice and the story is so important. So you want to make sure you just don't incorporate the technology for technology's sake, but making sure that that technology matches the outcome that you're looking for. So voice is extremely important, and getting that story from the veterans and incorporating that, and not only conducting interviews and learning how to conduct an interview best practices, but also putting together a podcast. So that's a whole different thing. It's multimodal, it's layered. So going into the classroom, talking about podcasting, introducing podcasting. I was surprised that some of the class haven't really listened to podcasts. So breaking down a podcast and teaching that. So we did a lot of talking about multimodal storytelling. What is multimodal? What does that mean? Breaking apart the elements, pulling the curtain back and kind of revealing the guts of the project. So what are the multimodal elements that you hear when putting together a podcast? Well, there's voice. Who's the voice? Who's the storyteller? The students are the storytellers. They're guiding you through this journey. Conducting interviews, that's another voice that we're hearing. And representing and, addressing that interview in a way that people can relate to applying multimodal elements such as music. What is the function of music? Not just saying, okay, well, we incorporate music, that's great, but what is the function of music? What does that act as? Okay, music can act as a transition. Music sets the tone. Sound effects, creating that environment for the listener, because a podcast, oh, I'm sorry, Yoda, baby Yoda. So bringing all these multimodal elements together to create one cohesive story. So also conducting, students are used to creating papers or writing papers, but how do you conduct research? It is research. Creating a podcast, a multimodal story, is research like anything else. So where do you find this research? So we talk a lot about copyright. We talk about Creative Commons, where to find resources that aren't copyrighted. We talk about fair use a little bit. So sharing these resources, and I do want to hand out these resources to you. You can pass these back. So this is a resource guide. Thank you. Of different sites over the years where I've found really great resources for music and sound effects and Creative Commons. And then finally, the technology training. Working through and assessing the project in the first run, going from Audacity, which is an audio editing software, to Adobe Premiere Rush, which I felt was a little bit more user-friendly. And we are an Adobe institution, so it is great to promote the tools and the free tools that students have access to, faculty and staff have access to, and maybe they don't even know that they have access to. And also with academic technology, we do support students in the curriculum. So currently I have 3 technology consultants that are stationed in the ZSR Mac Lab Monday through Thursday. They are a great resource for students after hours. If I'm not available, they certainly are, and they are prepped and aware of all the different projects that we're working on in the curriculum and the technology. So it's great to have that support for students as well, peer one-on-one support. Okay, so now I would like to introduce Jordan Diamond, who is going to talk about his student experience.
Hello. So I was one of the few students who had never actually listened to a podcast before or even had the chance to create one. So I was glad to have a new opportunity to express ideas or be able to not write a paper and do something different. So I really enjoyed that part. So with Wakerspace, I was able to get a lot of help because I hadn't been able to do this on my own. So I did get a lot of help from the resources I had. And I had also not been able to find someone on my own to interview. So I had asked my professor to find me a veteran from the ROTC program that would be helpful in the interview process. And when I had interviewed them, I had come in with a whole bunch of questions like lined out, and I hadn't asked a single one of them because we ended up just having a conversation. It was very organic, and it really wasn't as rigid as like a paper where we had to go through like bullet points and like structure it really formally. So it was more of an informal conversation where I really got out what his experiences were, because something like civil military relations, which our project was on, really can't be expressed through like a couple of statistics. It was really about their personal story and reflection on that. So once I had finished the interview, I had a whole lot of material that was like over the amount of time that was recommended for me. So I got to go back and edit, but be able to take out like the really strong points and answer the questions that I hadn't been able to ask like directly, because we had like answered them subtly as we had our conversation. So I was able to take those really key pieces and just put them together, and also not have the structure of a paper, because if I added like a sound effect somewhere or added some music within, like I could really just break up topics very distinctly without having to like create like topic sentences or transitions that are really sometimes difficult to do. So after I finished it, I was really glad that I had the opportunity to do this because it is a new platform that I was able to like express ideas from, and instead of having, it was more creative and fun to do this because it was informal and I really just had a conversation with someone. It really wasn't something where I had to find sources from like different websites or like read a book. It was more I got to talk to the resource itself and really get the most out of the process of that. And I really got the more emotional side of civil military relations because he felt comfortable with talking to me, and it's something that someone may not be able to publish in an article online because, you know, they're not as open when they know it's going to be viewed by millions of people and they have to like publish something to a company. This was just, I'm just a student, and he was able to just tell me how he was able to be in the military and then come back home and how that was important for his life. And even though, so to wrap up, I had not known how to do a podcast before, but even though I'm not as familiar, I could still do it again. And I would definitely want to do it again because it was more fun than a paper. And I had been able to promote this class to one of my friends, and he actually took it. And he really enjoyed doing the podcast as well. And he was also one of those students who hadn't really used a podcast as like a platform to do one of their assignments before. So I was able to help him out with that and teach him about it, even though I hadn't even known how to even start before. So I was really glad that I now have a new place where I could do an assignment.
And then we'll invite Ethan up to talk about his experience too.
Hi, everyone. So I guess I just had like 3 big takeaways from doing this project, which were really important to me. The first was, has already been stated, this time management. I tried to be a maverick throughout this project and basically just go head on and, you know, adapt to any technical difficulties that I encountered, and that created problems. And so I literally planned this project for a week out in advance, but I ended up going down to like the night before trying to fix those technical difficulties. So that was one issue. But I'm here today talking about an excellent podcast, so I think it worked out in the end. The second takeaway I had was adaptability. Adaptability for me came through not only talking to a veteran in real time and getting their experiences and hearing their answers and adapting my questions to those answers, but also the ability to adapt, I think, to technological difficulties and overcoming those challenges to create a good podcast. That's something that I feel like in a paper where you could hide behind like the word spell checks, you could hide behind your Grammarly software. A podcast really allowed me to have that ability to adapt in real time and also to fix those technical issues which were unfamiliar to me. So that was a big plus for me. The third takeaway I had is just about learning itself, because for me, podcasts, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, but particularly doing this podcast, I think taught me a lot about what it actually means to learn something, because when you're forced to be your authentic self and when you're forced to adapt and know your content well enough so that when you go and talk to a veteran or when you go and talk to someone else in whatever format it may be, I feel like that is a real learning experience because it gives you some real takeaways. But when you contrast that to something like a paper or like a presentation, that has less of a takeaway because you're focused more on memorization, you're focused more on the details, the facts, the intricacies of the paper, rather than actually adapting and learning real lifelong tools and learning experiences. So for me, those were the 3 big takeaways from this project. I would also say that, so I got to I got to talk with my grandpa in this project, and he's a veteran. He served in Berlin just after World War II. He actually wasn't doing too well in school initially, so he went to Berlin to focus on dentistry, and work in the medical camps there. And so I got to talk to him about that because that was actually a very revealing and interesting experience, because when you think of veterans, you think of a lot of veterans being in combat zones, you think of veterans being in combat areas, you think of them having PTSD, right? This is the common conceptions we have about our veterans. But to be able to hear a different side of that, to be able to hear what my grandpa actually had to say about these different experiences was really a great takeaway for me, and also a story that I hadn't heard before. Like, I've known my grandpa for 19 years of my life now, but never before had I actually heard him talk about his life like this. And I had never heard him talk about his experiences in Berlin, talking to locals there, what his experiences were like, and learning, and also the opportunities that the military gave him. These were all valuable takeaways from talking with my grandpa, and frankly, I think it left us in a better relationship as the podcast ended, because we both knew each other a little bit better, and he felt comfortable sharing those experiences with me because of that. So for the reasons of time management, adaptability, and learning itself, I would really recommend podcasts for future students. So thank you.
Okay, and I would like to introduce Captain Michael Fisher, and he's going to talk about his experience being interviewed for this podcast project.
Good afternoon. I'm Captain Fisher. I teach here at the ROTC department as well, military science, and I also teach a first-year seminar, so I'll probably incorporate a podcast next time. One of the questions that came up to me was, how do I explain my experience to someone who has no experience? So how do I explain someone who has no frame of reference? What I did in Afghanistan when I was deployed specifically was route clearance. I drove around and I looked for bombs. That's what I did. So I kind of liken this to, if you were speaking to someone who perhaps was blind, how would you explain the color purple? It's impossible to do so. There's no frame of reference. So what I learned was you really have to be descriptive. Come up with something that they can relate to in some way. Movies typically help. Unfortunately, movies that, like Michael Bay movies, explosions are always big and huge fireballs, and that's not realistic. Explosions are typically just pressure and a small fireball. But it's very difficult, and it was a good exercise in practicing my, descriptive diction to try and get him to understand. And there was being one-on-one in a podcast room. It kind of takes the distractions away. You kind of just, as I mentioned before, have a conversation. And it helps. That way he could ask for clarification if I use some sort of jargon that he had no idea what it is. So the military is its own subculture. We have our own language, like any industry. We have our own language. That's how we talk. And I say this to my class all the time. If I say something and you don't understand what I'm talking about, please ask, because it probably means something different than what actually it means. One of those metaphors or euphemisms or have it. But as I mentioned, it was difficult at first, but overall generally rewarding once I felt like I got to him and could share my experiences in some way that he could understand. And while he'll never fully understand what I went through or what I deal with on a daily basis, he has a small part of what happened. The most interesting thing that came out, other than having to realize I needed to use better diction, was the amount of time I actually paused to think about the questions. And you don't get that in a paper. It's edited out in a transcript. So if he asked me a question, I was like, well, that actually gives me pause. I need to think how to say this without, coming off weird or in a way that he can understand. So having done this 3 times now for Colonel Ringheis and Colonel Greider, the first time it was a paper, and it was interesting. The second 2 times were both podcasts. And I feel the podcast I got through to the person way more than him just going down a checklist of questions and I just answered them the best of my ability. The conversation aspect is much better. You actually kind of come away with something. I learned a little about him. He learned, hopefully, something about me and the military in general. But overall, I highly recommend using it, and I'm probably going to incorporate it the next time I teach my first-year seminar. So, thank you.
Okay, so we would like to showcase a couple of the podcasts. We just have very short clips. Jordan, would you like to just give us a brief synopsis of what we're going to hear?
I don't know that he's driving, so.
What's that?
The parts that they're presenting that's on there. So
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, here we go.
Mr. Bradley has had some amazing experiences From all his time spent within the military, he has great insight into where we thrive and where we fall short as a military. Mr. Bradley's expertise in human resources, as well as Star Wars, can help us figure out how to move forward with civil-military relations. First, Mr. Bradley believes that countries, or galactic empires, go to war for the same reasons: fear, honor, interest. Star Wars is great at depicting what war is about. In the case of the Empire, they are interested in ruling the galaxy. The rebels are fearful of such a dictatorship and seek democracy. If Darth Vader spent less time terrorizing his officers and spent more time organizing and directing, maybe the rebels wouldn't have blown up the Death Star. The rebels, on the other hand, had a chain of command. Although they were smaller numbers, each level within the rebellion had the ability to express their opinion. A civilian like Han Solo was able to climb the ranks within the military to eventually become a general. This is a more direct approach, but clearly a way to influence the rebels' plans. Another example is in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, where a Resistance pilot, Poe Dameron, was able to defy and disobey commands from upper ranks and lead the Air Forces to victory. In this case, we see how open dialogue within the military itself allowed opinions to be considered, and a person without the title of leader was able to take charge and win battles. Within the prequels, we can see how the Jedi, the Supreme Chancellor, the clones, and the public interact with one another. The Jedi made decisions and followed their Jedi code, and the clones executed orders. The public had little say in Jedi actions, and they weren't allowed to nominate Jedi or personnel to the council. Maybe if the public was involved and had a voice within the Jedi Council, Chancellor Palpatine wouldn't have rose to power. Next, Mr. Bradley had mentioned how there can be some improvement as far as behavioral and general help to returning military members from deployments. A parallel can be made to the clones of Star Wars. Neither U.S. troops or clones are completely accepted back into society, as well as given enough resources to be successful after deployment. Although the clones seem to have it much worse than a U.S. soldier, both the Republic in Star Wars and the government of the United States.
Okay.
So I pulled this section from Jordan's because it shows how he applied some of the stuff that Mr. Bradley talked to him about and then went back and talked about Star Wars and some of the things we talked about in class, like the separation between the all-volunteer force and those who, and the citizens who serve or who don't serve. And so it's a great example of how, part of the project was for them to actually apply the things we learned in class along with what the veteran had talked about in their conversation that they had. And then I think for Ethan, we've got some of his discussion with his grandfather, and then also some of his analysis about how it fits in those conversations he had with his grandfather about a completely different time in Berlin, not in the current wars, can be applied to some of the Star Wars topics.
Should we play the one with his grandfather?
Yeah.
Is that two, I think? The second one?
Interestingly enough, even some of the clone. When you think of the military, you don't think of
No.
Jedi librarians.
Okay.
When you think of the military, we don't think of the engineers, the naval operations coordinators, the medical teams, the professors, or the plethora of other fields that the U.S. military is involved in. Chapter 2 of Strategy Strikes Back discusses the Jedi Code and its teaching methods as well. Of course, the Jedi are synonymous with combat in the war with the Trade Federation, but there are also Jedi archivists, Jedi librarians, temple guardians, teachers, healers, counselors, and so on. The bottom line is that these misperceptions cause an inability for the general public to relate to the military. If our conception of the military is that they are simply out shooting the bad guys, then that's all they'll ever be, just our protectors, never our fellow citizens. When we think of the military,
Oh, sorry.
we don't think of the engineers.
Finally, I was going to just play a snippet from Captain Fisher's interview.
Do you remember why you chose to join the military?
For several reasons, actually. When I was in college, I was studying music. I wanted to be a music teacher. So I studied my degrees in music, my undergrad degrees in music. About the same time, I was coming up with my senior year. It was just after the 2008 recession, and there were very few jobs to begin with, and now with that, fewer jobs still. And so I knew we had an ROTC program on my campus, and my girlfriend at the time was actually in the program, and she said, hey, I know you've been interested in getting in shape, getting in better shape, why don't you come out to PT and come check out the ROTC program. And I did, and I found out I was pretty good at it. And so I joined my senior year, and I had to stay an additional year. So I did a super senior year, and then I commissioned into the Army. So I guess the reason was necessity. It wasn't necessarily a huge call. My dad had served in the Navy, so I was familiar with the military lifestyle. But I guess out of necessity, and also because I guess I wanted to do something that seemed kind of fun and daunting at the same time, and it turned out to be I was pretty good at it, and I liked that. So I liked the physical challenge, I liked the mental challenge, and I guess that's the reason why I joined the Army.
Do you remember why you chose to join the
There you go. And I didn't pick that to have Captain Fisher have to tell his whole life story, but I mean, for a lot of students, I think they have a misperception about who joins the all-volunteer force and about, you know, why we choose to serve. And I think that was a great example of it's not necessarily a clear thought in your mind when you're 18 to 22 years old that I want to die for my country. There's lots of reasons why people join the Army, and I think that's also a great learning point for them to get as citizens is there's more to this than just the clean black and white that you like to live in when you're a little bit younger, and that a lot of people end up serving for a lot of different reasons, and there's goodness in that. So this final picture is my first class that I taught. So if you don't know, Greensboro has a May the 4th run, and so I invited them all to join me. Amazingly, that many students showed up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning prior to finals. I did offer extra credit if you ran in costume, but I really appreciated that they had some great costumes and were very excited to participate in the May the 4th. And so it was great to have a class, and the last class I taught and the one that I'm teaching now, who really kind of engaged in a lot of different ways in both the education aspects of this, but just the fun. And I mean, you gotta love anybody who in May runs in a Chewbacca costume. So. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate that you guys listened to our discussion, and if there are any questions, we're happy to answer questions at this point.
Thanks. No questions?
As I say, if we have questions, we can point with the lightsabers.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll be here for another minute or so if you have any questions and you want to come up. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, good job. That was great. Awesome. I really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So it looks like you guys can grab a lunch if you'd like.
Yes, please.
There's turkey and ham sandwiches and I think a wrap or something back there. So grab a lunch. Might as well get food, right?
Yeah, there's another table over here.
Thank you so much, and let me know if you guys need anything.
Thank you. That was great. So much. That was awesome. That was wonderful.
I'm gonna have to use that baby Yoda, but I don't want to.
I know. Yeah, Paul made me swear I would bring it back. I was like, it's so cool. And it's like, it is. It's like my cat. Yeah, please grab some lunch.
because they've told me to. If it were not here, I would be wandering around. So this is why I'm tethered to the piece of wood in front of you. Thanks so much, Paul, for asking me to be a part of this and to do this. I am delighted to be associated with what is going on out there. I've never seen that before, and so just walking around was quite impressed by all the people that were engaging. We will do this, and then we will be done, and I think we're out at 3 o'clock. So I'm the last thing before we're over. Is that correct? So I should move along then. Yeah, sure. Yes, I would agree with that perspective. Absolutely. I decided to call this talk, Isn't That the Old Student Health Building? Because that is all I've heard about the Waker Space over the course of the last 2 years. Let me explain my journey. I have very deep roots, as does my family in Wake Forest. My wife's aunt, who is my aunt by marriage, who I just call my aunt, is sitting there. She has been associated with Wake for many, many years teaching. Her husband was Dudley Shapiro, who was on staff, faculty, teaching. We have come from a long line of people who bleed gold and black in our home. I was delighted back in the mid-'80s to work with this fellow here, John Chrisman, in the theater department. So this is me in Inherit the Wind. John, I'm sure you remember that performance. This was back when Wake Forest had a master's program in theater. And so I was a master's degree student here on campus. My sister lives in Winston-Salem. My niece grew up in Winston-Salem. We've been coming to Winston-Salem since the mid-'70s. And of course, I met my wife, as you would think, here on campus. I actually met my wife, Sue, on an airplane, sat next to her on an airplane traveling to London to study theater for 16 days. I was going to study theater. She was going to shop at every Laura Ashley in London. That's the way that the story goes. And it's all very true. But a year later, we were married. We graduated, of course, in '87. And then life began for us. We were married in December of 1987, 51 weeks to the day after we met on that airplane. Something I would never encourage my children to do now, but, you know, times are a little different. We have 3 children. This is Emily and Alex and Michael. Emily on the side, of course, and Alex in the middle. They are both Wake Forest graduates. Michael we don't talk about too much because he went to the University of Georgia. So that's okay. When we want to talk football, we talk University of Georgia. When we want to talk about just great education, we talk about Emily and Alex. And then, of course, over the years, we've been coming back for things and been still associated with our beloved Demon Deacon and really getting back into the swing of being here on campus. Now, I spent 30 years outside of Wake Forest after I graduated working for a little chicken company called Chick-fil-A. And that's what I did. I took my theater degree and I parlayed that into a business long career, 3 decades of selling chicken, and worked getting people to eat more chicken for 30 years. But I retired a year and a half ago, and retirement is good. And the last thing I did at Chick-fil-A was I worked in the field of innovation. So I taught and worked on the curriculum for and socialized corporate innovation. So everything from products that were being made to process that was being done to new buildings and restaurant design, I was trying to teach people how to apply design thinking, and got heavily into corporate innovation. That was the last 8 years of my career. I was involved in the Wake Forest Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship Board. And then once I retired, I decided I needed something to do. So I called Dan Cohen promptly and said, have you ever thought about having an entrepreneurship class but calling it intrapreneurship? In other words, innovation within a corporate setting. Not just being an entrepreneur and going out for yourself, but innovating within a corporate setting. And he said, we've thought about it, but we were going to focus on entrepreneurship right now, primarily because we've been all over the place and primarily because I don't have somebody to teach it or I don't have curriculum. And I said, congratulations, it's your lucky day. I've retired from Chick-fil-A. We have a teacher and we have curriculum. So he invited me in, and now I'm an adjunct, and I began my faculty, I'll use that in quotations because I have real faculty in the room and I don't want to offend them. I began my faculty assignment last spring. So last spring, I arrived on campus. It wasn't raining. It was actually fairly nice with blue skies, and I began to teach a course called Entrepreneurship 304, which is entrepreneurship or corporate innovation. It was great. I was preparing for it. I knew what I was going to talk about. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to ask the question, where was my class going to be? And I found out that my class in our lovely campus here was in one of the older, more fondly thought of buildings called Tribble Hall. Tribble is also the place where my aunt taught and had her office. And I went to my classroom and promptly saw this. Now, that's not exactly the class, but that's real close to what the layout of it. And here I was, a brand new college professor, and I was going to be teaching at my alma mater, and I walked into a space which I was very grateful to have, but I knew that there was a significant difference between this and what I was used to. See, I was used to an 80,000 square foot innovation center. I was used to tables that were rolling. I was used to chairs that rolled. I was used to things that you could write on. I was used to all these other components of an innovation space that were important to innovation. And so you can understand a little bit why my heart sank when I went here. First of all, I recognized quite quickly that if I plugged my computer in, the projector was there, and the screen came down here, and the screen came down over the whiteboard. So I had a choice to make. What do I do? Because the projector doesn't go that way, the class is facing this way. So I had to cope, and it was tough. And I spent about 2 weeks going, honestly, I hate this. I can't do this. This is really, really difficult. So I went on a walkabout. And I'd heard somebody talk about this place that used to be the old student health building. And of course, it wasn't the student health building when I was here in '85, because that was in another building. There were no trailers in the parking lot. And I walked up the steps into this space, and I'm happy to report that within 2 weeks, I was able to switch the location of the class to the Waker space, the old student health building, and wound up with 24 students, happy, healthy, ready to go, become corporate innovators. And I attribute that to a lot of things. I think their willingness to go with me on this journey to learn about corporate innovation is certainly part of the deal. But to be honest, I also attribute a lot of that to these two trailers that are out that have this continuous puff of smoke in front of them all the time. You can just catch it over here. Paul says it's steam. I guess I believe him, but I do avoid walking through it because I'm not sure what's going to get on my clothes, something out of the open manhole cover. But anyway, we move the class, we have this space, and now I'm in the middle of, well, not the middle, actually the end of a half semester, because my semester goes 7 weeks. It's a 7-week course, and we cram everything in. We cram a whole semester in 7 weeks. So we spend 5 hours a week in this space. And I was able to, just a couple weeks ago, share with my students, none of whom are here, so I'm disappointed in that, have to take points away from them. But to be fair, I told them that they didn't have to come. So they're in the middle of other things. But I did ask them, why do you like this space? Why do you care that we're here as opposed to where we were, as opposed to another place? And I want to break the responses down into 3 groups. because I think the three different themes that I heard are all significant, and they're all a reason to explore, to be honest, Paul, they're all a reason to explore having more places like the Waker Space, or having a larger Waker Space, or, I don't know, having a parallel universe where we can go to and have an 80,000 square foot Waker Space. So here are the themes that I thought I'd share with you today, so that we get out of the habit of thinking of it as the old student health building and into the habit of it as thinking about the coolest, most innovative place on campus to have a class. All right? So the first theme, this place is more comfortable, it's got a relaxed vibe, and it's easily accessible. I remember when I went to Tribble for the first time. There are stairways that only go up half a floor. There's is it A, B, and C side of the building? They told me before I had my first class, they said, you better go and find out where your 3.0 whatever it was. You better go there, figure out how to get there, because if you wait till the day of, you're going to be toast. The Waker Space is easily accessible. It's right out in the middle of the parking lot. It has a large sign on it that says Waker Space. I have students who literally drive up as I'm walking into class. They drive up and they park their car in the front slot right in front of the Waker Space. They walk up a small set of stairs, and there they are. They walk in, they don't have to scan, they don't have to do anything, and they move beautifully into this 2-trailer situation. 6 trailers. So it's not 2 double wides. It's 6 singles. Okay, I always thought it was 2 double wides. They move beautifully into these 6 single trailers. Great, thank you for the correction. And they are greeted by somebody when they walk in. There's this little area that's back there, and there's a friendly, smiling face. And this wasn't like, this shot is not a shot that was something that I took like 3 months ago. It's not something that was in somebody's files. This was, as of this morning, this was the smiling face. And behind the glass with the smiling face is a whole kitchen that Tribble didn't have, but the Waker Space does have. There's a microwave, there's a coffee maker, there's a refrigerator. Paul's all the time asking me, hey, do you want donuts? Somebody brought donuts today. Come have some coffee. Somebody did something nice. And there are cookies inside the refrigerator. There's ice cream. I've been offered ice cream before my class. Who does that? Seriously. Nobody. Except at the Waker Space. And the whole vibe that the students are talking about is this friendly atmosphere that is quite different than anything else that they're used to. So not only do you have the things like coffee machines and the friendly smiling face, doggone it, there's a jukebox. There is an honest-to-goodness jukebox, and I've learned that this fella, Paul Whitener, is it 6 jukeboxes? 7 jukeboxes. He's a jukebox collector. He put one in the Waker Space. It does work. I plug it in, I turn on music, and we're jamming. Doesn't happen in Tribble. Also, there are couches. There are comfortable places to sit. There's a variety of different singles and doubles. There's a bathroom even when you walk in. And then there's a screen that tells you what's coming up in terms of all the different opportunities to learn. This place is amazing. No place else on campus that I know of does this. And yet, it's still the old student health building. How do we change the way people think about what this is and how it's being offered and how it's being used? It's got a different vibe. It's got a creative vibe. It's got a very open and accessible vibe. It's very much like the learning environments that I'm used to in corporate America, and that we put together where people were together in one place and where they were comfortable and they were learning and they were collaborating. And I love it there. The second theme that I heard from my students was this one. And this relates really to the technology and the stuff that the Waker Space is known for outside of this really cool vibe. And Paul, this is where we'll have you chime in on some things. Everything is free. Seriously. They don't have to pay for anything. everything in the space that they can use, so long as they're using it for something that has to do with a class, is totally free and clear to them. It's all hands-on. The tech is good. I heard that from students who were of the current generation. The tech is good. It's stuff we can count on. It's stuff we want to interact with, and that it is more of a workspace. In other words, when they come to class, their mentality is not, I'm going to get lectured at. Their mentality is, we're going to do work. We're going to work on things together. I noticed today that there's this bunch of badges. Somebody pointed out, Barbara pointed out to me, she said, you need to take a picture of those badges because those are all the volunteers that work in the Waker space. So there are constantly people in it that can answer your questions. I don't know about you, but if I have problems in another building and the tech doesn't work, I have to locate where the number is to call, or I have to figure out where the directions are on the computer terminal thingy to plug in, and it could be 10 minutes before somebody shows up. In the Waker space, there's somebody in-house all the time. Also, let's get into some of the other, I hesitate to call it tech. Some of it is more analog, but some of it is a little bit more digital. This is analog. These are button makers. I wore my Waker Space button today for you, Paul. And so you can do things like make any type of button that you want for a promotion that you're working on, for a different class where you need to promote something. People are in there making buttons all the time. I've never seen so many buttons in my life. In fact, they have a wall that's just nothing but buttons of all the things that students have used. Paul, do you have a particular use of buttons that comes to mind when you think of that machine and how it works?
So yeah, the one that we get a lot of is students like to use them for celebrating birthdays or things for their fellow classmates and their fellow roommates and things. They do a lot of just coming and making buttons. We have a lot of students that make buttons for the athletic games that are going on. Beat Duke, for example.
Okay,
tonight.
right,
And somebody
right.
come and make a lot of Beat Duke buttons.
Big Duke buttons,
yesterday.
yeah.
So yeah, so buttons are very popular, and then as you can see, we have a lot of just for fun buttons. Like I'm a stash you to leave, and we have
This Avengers button right
the
here.
Avengers buttons.
Not a villain, yeah,
exactly.
sure, right. Okay, so you walk in and you start with the button maker, and then it just goes crazy from there. Just totally crazy. They have vinyl cutting machines. So this is a large vinyl cutting machine. This is a small vinyl cutting machine. So if you need vinyls for posters, if you need vinyls for anything that needs to stick on a car or a decal or anything like that, or maybe you need vinyls cut for a project that you're working on for class. In corporate innovation, the reason that we get a chance to use the Waker Space is because we connect it back to the purpose of the Waker Space. And the way I do that is when the class does their final presentation, I have them take the logo for the corporation they're going to be presenting on, and they have to figure out which of these bays in the Waker Space they are going to use to create a corporate logo. Today I had a group that used the vinyl cutters. They created a vinyl on a piece of wood for Disney. On Thursday, they're going to spend 15 minutes talking about Disney and innovation and how their corporate innovation center is set up for Disney. We've got people using it for Google. I had people making the Tesla logo today out of cotton balls and wire. It was very, very interesting because there are all kinds of ways and methods for them to use in the Waker Space. Sewing machines. Come on in, y'all. Come on, it's fine. Sewing machines are in one of the first bays, 2 or 3 at least, and then there are all these signs all over the place for knitting. If you were a cat, you would love the Waker Space because there is yarn aplenty. Everywhere you look, there are baskets of yarn. I don't know what people are making with yarn. Or is it just whatever they want to, Paul, or how's the yarn work?
Well, we have a program called Commit to Knit.
Commit to Knit.
Tuesday.
Okay.
And we have faculty, staff, and students, about 12 to 15 regulars that come in and knit and converse, and it's really about the community.
Okay.
And they make everything from I'm a beginner to I'm a professional, and we have folks there like Hannah Insco from Academic Technologies that's been knitting forever,
and she's always there, or someone else, Dr. Sarah Rayner from math is there.
Okay.
And they've been knitting, and they can help you get started, or they can help you with something complicated. So people knit anything and everything. You name it, they've knitted it there.
And their yarn is there to prove that there's knitting going on.
Yes, there's
It's
tons of
a lot. Did I mention there's a lot of yarn in the makerspace? Next, we move into the. Go ahead.
And it's all free.
And it's all free. The yarn is all free. So many trips to Joann's, I'm guessing, that kind of thing. The next bay is really more high tech, and you have to get trained to work in this particular bay, and that's the laser cutting bay. And the laser cutting machine is incredible. There's constantly a piece of wood or something in there that is, you've got this smell of burning wood that happens. You know the smell, John.
And a good morning, I come to park at Scales, and I can smell the wood.
Smell the burning wood, and there's sheets of it, like big sheets. This is a large sheet, but it gets bigger than that. He's pulling 4x4s off this laser cutter etcher thing, and I've been told you can actually etch metal glasses and things like that. You can use it to build all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
You can use it to etch trophies. You can use it to. I've been told you can etch your computer on this.
You can.
You
can etch aluminum computers, Macs or iPads or non-glass backed iPhones. But the rule is, we'll help you set everything up, but you press start, no warranty.
Okay, there you go. It is, and the warranty is also free. So there you go. The computer etching and the laser cutting is just really cool to behold. And it's not just about people that have to make the widget or make the thing. I'm reminded of the principle every time I work in the walk to class or walk through the class, is that you bring your imagination when you come to the Wakerspace. Bring your imagination. This isn't a plug and play situation. This is you walk in and think about what could be and how you could use things and what you might do and how you could take this and connect it to something else. And that's what I think is beautiful about the Wakerspace, is it is a place for connection. Students running into each other. I had one student comment and said, we like having class in the middle of the class and there being other students in the bays working on things. This sense of colliding. The thing they were trying to do at Pixar when they built the football field size lunch area just to create collisions. That's what's going on in the Wakerspace. Getting analog again, you have things that are t-shirts. You want to talk about your shirt there? What? Yeah, show everybody what you did.
We do t-shirt pressing at the Wakerspace with the vinyl cutter and then pressing on the t-shirts, sweatshirts, and things like that. That's our t-shirt press.
You actually make pillows too.
We do make
Pillow
pillows as
forms.
well.
And here's the secret about the Wakerspace that I want you to realize. Pillows are a requirement, okay? If you're gonna sit on a stool, yes, Paul, I'm gonna go there. I know it's in the budget. You're gonna get it. I'm praying for you, man. The stools that you sit on, you need a cushion. So find a cushion, find a polyfill, just foam thing, and you bring in your t-shirt, and they'll make the cushion cover for you. So you don't wind up pull up lame after 2 hours. Sore, yeah. All right. 3D printing. 3D printers, how many are in?
6.
6 3D printers, and one prints larger, or 2 print larger than the other 4. One prints larger than the other 4. You go in and you see every day, you'll hear bzz, 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 and you wonder, okay, what is going on? And when you go back in there, you see these spools of wire, and they're not wire, they're plastic, and they're all over the place. As much plastic spools as there is yarn, I would say, probably equal parts, and you can select the kind of plastic you want. You can select the gauge you want. I mean, you can color. People are printing things I don't even know what they're printing. They're printing D&D pieces. I know they're doing that.
Right.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons pieces all the time. We have a lot of the startup lab folks come in and 3D print things for their entrepreneurship shin guards for their startup lab projects. We have people printing things for fun, and also for academic purposes. We have a chemistry class coming in right now, printing proteins and things like that right now.
Oh, wow.
So
It's amazing.
pretty much anything and everything.
This was on the machine today. I have no idea what that is, but it looked extremely interesting. I'll go back after this and see what that winds up turning out to be. Yeah. We have students that, of course, print their logos for their project in 3D form. And this was the one for Google. We also have things like leather making, leather tapping, leather working, hand tool leather working. You know, I didn't even wear my belt today, but they have, if I needed one, I could go over there and hand tool leather craft it. All kinds of things, including the deadly things that you might find like in John's old world of the scene shop at the theater. Big saws, big screw guns, hand saws, lots of power tools. And I suppose people use that for things, although I've never seen the big saw being used yet.
We move it outside when we use it.
Okay.
And we don't use it during classes when you're teaching.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that. And what do people use the larger stuff for?
We've had things like soda bottle racks being made, substitute soda for what you will. We've had people make boxes and coin boxes and things like that from reclaimed wood that we have in the space.
So if I'm making a soda bottle rack, how do I get to do that for free if clearly you know that's not for a class?
Well, we have two sides. We have our academic side for things that are for classes.
Okay.
But we also have workshops and things for the wellness side, where you come in to learn because you want to learn to make something, or you want to learn to woodwork, or you want to learn to laser or 3D print. So it does not have to be tied to a class to be used in the Wakerspace. There are two sides of our mission.
Okay. So that's how that gets
We
done.
offer workshops every week on all.
We do, and I was to one 2 weeks ago. Yep, and they're very informative. You know, they're not long; they're 90 minutes to an hour, and you can go in there and get as much as you want. And then there's the podcast room, which I think is remarkable because according to Paul, this is the #1 used thing, right?
From last year, from our opening on November 19th, 2018.
Yeah.
To November 19th, 2019, it was our #1 used room.
And I'm not going to explain what they use this for. I would love for you to tell people why they use the podcast room.
So again, it's that twofold mission. We have students that come every single week and they do a podcast on sports or on politics or on religion, and they post it, and it's just something they want to do for fun. Then on the academic side, we have classes that assign podcasting as one of the assignments. For example, we have a journalism class that uses our podcast room as well as other podcasting facilities around campus, whether it's a portable podcast or just their iPhone where they're recording, to determine, okay, what do you have to do when you're doing a good podcast? You have to pay attention to your surroundings. So what mics do you need? We have a lot of language classes that come in and assign podcasting as one of their requirements, because when students learning a foreign language have to actually speak that language and faculty can then listen to how they pronounce it, it's a really good gauge of how well their students are learning. So again, it plays to both sides of that mission.
And there's a Russian class that meets in there.
There are two that actually
And
meet.
that's why I couldn't meet in there when I wanted to one of the times this time, because the Russian class was meeting in there. But the point being is that you can use the space to do things beyond making widgets.
Correct.
You have to use your imagination on how to get engaged with it. So that was the second kind of area that the students really liked. They liked the fact, #1, that it had a great vibe, it was comfortable. They liked the fact, #2, that it was equipped with all the stuff that they would need, and it was all free. And then finally, they liked the layout of it. They like that it's a very workable space. They like that everything is open in it, and they like the fact that everything's up front. So as a student, they're not looking here and then having to look here, and then having to look here and having to look here. Everything can be presented from one direction because there's the projector and the monitor, and it's in one place, and there are whiteboards up front as well, so you don't have to keep craning your neck. In terms of it being an open space, It's beautiful because from a reclaim standpoint, these tables were made from dorm doors and bunk beds.
The doors are actually from the examination rooms from the old student health.
But they're doors.
But
The
they're
tops are doors.
The
Yeah,
tops are doors,
yeah, yeah.
And then the table legs are reclaimed dorm beds.
From the dorm beds.
That's correct.
So you can go in and you can see at the front here, there's a key latch. And so the things that are in it have been reclaimed, and we are constantly, like in this particular scenario here, I don't know about any other folks in the room who teach, but I love being able to walk the room. I love being able to go in between where students are sitting and getting out there with them and not being at the front. And so this offers me an opportunity to really kind of connect and get in close proximity of people who, are in the class. We have, like I'd mentioned before, the tables for working together where they can get around and actually, it's really tough to do this in Tribble. You can't do this when you have desks with attached tables to it and people are pulling them around. You cannot function like this. That's really, truly remarkable. I don't know how many places on campus do this. And of course, as I was talking about things from One Direction, I can use the monitor, I can use the boards that are flanking, and if I get really crazy and I want to use more whiteboards, they have whiteboards on the side of the class too. Whiteboards are great for students to be able to walk around and create things like mind maps. In our particular instance with this class, we're really recreating the sense of an innovation center. So we'll get together and everybody will get markers and we'll go to solve a problem and we'll gather around and we'll create how might we statements and we'll pull off mind maps from there and people will collaborate and work together and do basically a yes and. It's an improv exercise, but you do it with markers and they pull off and they plus up each other's work. You can't do this in another classroom. Post-it notes, things like that are available. You get around, you work together, and you really do collaborate. You can build things. One final point that they made, and I thought this was a good one, and I'll leave this one with you, was that it aligns with the purpose of our class. Because we're an entrepreneurship class, we really have to think about how you innovate and the ways that you do that, and design thinking and how that best works. And for us, it does provide the hands-on and open discussion that we need in order for groups to work together. And it works for us because that's the way innovation works. Now, I don't know how it works for the Russian class. I don't know how it might work for an econ class. I don't know how it might work for a history class. But I get the sense that you could teach just about anything in this space as long as you throw a little bit of imagination at it and try to figure out what's the best way to use it to create an open environment where discussion can happen, where collaboration can happen, where creativity can happen, and where collisions can happen. We even did, because it's been raining so much, we were going to go to Scales and drop things off the second story, but we couldn't get over there because there was a monsoon going on outside. So we dropped little pieces of paper off of the ceiling and timed them to see how long it took for them to hit the ground. And then the teams reworked it and tried to make that time go even greater. So how do you get the paper to drop more slowly, more slowly, more slowly? Just basically reiterating a process of prototyping, a very basic process of prototyping. So we use it any way that we can. Students love it. It causes them to work together. It causes them to put ideas up, look at each other's ideas, comment on each other's ideas. It's comfortable, it's free, it's functional, it's conversational, and finally, it has this guy. And if there's a secret sauce to the Wakerspace, it's Paul Whitener. Paul lets us do what we want to do within reason, and also helps us think through all the different ways that we might be able to be better teachers, better instructors, give better lessons on life, and open up more possibilities to the students at Wake Forest. And Paul, if not for you, I would be back in Tribble, and I would still have people saying, wait a minute, that's the old student health building. I appreciate it, what you're doing. I appreciate the opportunity. And I would love for us to get away from this language and really start getting into the language of the Wakerspace. May it be so. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Questions? He's here too. All right, great. Good.
Thank you, Steve.
We're done. Yay, go team go. Go see if there's still cookies left. They might still have cookies and such.